On the ground in Gaza, Israeli forces have again shot and killed Palestinians desperate to find food. At least 20 people have been killed at a food distribution point near the Nitzarem Corridor. On Monday, 14 Palestinians were killed near the US and Israeli-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation's aid center in southern Rafa. Well, we can speak to Liz Allcock. She's the head of humanitarian protection for medical aid for Palestinians, or MAP. She joins us now from Deir al-Balah, which is in central Gaza. Liz, these shootings we've been seeing and deaths of people trying to access food aid, I believe some of these deaths were also of people fighting each other. This was what so many organizations warned could happen, given the way that the GHF has approached distribution. So from your perspective, what's going on here?
Thank you for having me. And yes, it's entirely predictable, and it is exactly what the UN and others in the humanitarian community here were predicting and warning for many weeks prior to the commencement of the GHF operations. I use the acronym because calling it the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is erroneous, because there's absolutely nothing humanitarian about it at all. People are being forced by the Israelis to risk life and limb to gain access to their basic rights and entitlements of food and other basic necessities by putting themselves in harm's way to try and reach these distribution sites. And we're seeing at medical facilities across Gaza, particularly here in the south, multiple casualties and people with gunshot wounds to the head, to the spine, to the limbs, that have only really resulted from aggression by the Israeli military against people approaching aid sites.
Liz, what's actually in the packages that these crowds are trying so desperately to get? I believe it's mostly dry goods.
It's dry goods. It's the absolute very basics. There's sugar, flour, rice, canned beans. It's a very minimal nutritional value, and it's also supposedly sufficient for 7 days. But of course, that means that people are forced to make repeat visits and to undertake these hazardous journeys repeatedly if they are to be able to access sufficient amounts for a household for a decent amount of time. They aren't of any value to people who have come to rely on the UN and other humanitarian service provision around food aid, which was distributed at household level, was sufficient for at least a month. And to the extent whereby people are, the few who are able to obtain these parcels, many are selling them to be able to get cash to purchase the very few fresh goods on the market, which are locally grown tomatoes, onions, and cucumbers, which are seen as more nutritionally valuable to people than these goods that are being distributed.
Liz, that's really interesting. You said minimal nutritional value in these packages. The GHF has said that it's allocating around, I believe, 1,750 calories for a daily ration. But that is actually just 3/4 of what the Israeli Ministry of Defense itself had previously said is necessary to avoid malnutrition. And that was for a healthy population, not in wartime. So what are you seeing as the result of the levels of starvation and the lack of aid being provided right now?
It's a really devastating situation, and it's not in isolation either. So it's not only food that's the problem, which is obviously the fundamental issue and the main priority for people on a day-to-day basis to secure food for themselves and their families. But we have extremely limited access to water. We have almost no fuel. We've got very critical levels of fuel. And these three are codependent and mutually reinforcing. And so without access to fuel, you can't get access to water. Without access to water, you've got acute risk of reliance on unhealthy and unsafe drinking water or no water at all. You then have a higher risk of watery diarrhea, which can exacerbate childhood malnutrition. And without the food to be able to sustain a decent level of calorific intake, you have these sort of a cycle of deterioration in health and well-being that's having an absolutely devastating impact on all facets of society here in Gaza.
Liz, you mentioned that these aid packages are starting to appear in local markets. I believe they're being sold for hundreds of dollars.
Yeah, I believe that they're going for around $450. But keep in mind that a bag of 25 kilo bag of flour, if people are able to obtain them, and please bear in mind that these people are entitled to this food aid for free, so they shouldn't have to pay for it. But these are on the local market for around $800.
Wow.
So it's outside the realms of possibilities for the vast majority of people. And so selling of a food package which may last you a couple of days for half of that, half a bag of flour is seen as more valuable to people.
Liz, I'd like to ask, if you don't mind, for a bit of a personal reflection. I understand you returned to Gaza in June after some time away. Can you perhaps talk us through some of your impressions upon your return?
Every time I come back, I think we've hit rock bottom, to be honest, and yet then we've reached yet another new low. I was outside for a month, but within that month, the siege was extended another month. The GHF began operating, and colleagues tell me that the last 3 months, so since the siege began and since the unrestrained Israeli military aggression has massively escalated, they tell me that it's the worst time that they've experienced in these 20 months of this situation. I think what I feel this time is a sense of hopelessness and despair. No talk about the future. It's really a struggle to survive, not even on a daily basis, but an hour by hour basis. Just now, just before we came on air, there was a huge airstrike very close to here. We have staff who are moving right now from health facilities to the office and back. I don't know how they are. I don't know if they were caught up in an incident. It's an undertaking that we accept, but it's not without risk, and I think people will continue to work in the humanitarian sector here for as long as they can, but hope is in very, very short supply.
Liz Allcock, the head of humanitarian protection for medical aid for Palestinians, or MAP. Liz, thank you so much for joining us on Al Jazeera, and we do hope that your colleagues are safe.
Thank you.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.